grade school, high school kids that are just coming into it. The fitness level's not there, but you still want to get them on the track to say, this is where we're going, so you can still present it in that, as you were saying, the cool way. This is what these guys are doing over here. You're just like them. You're going to go through these same things.
That 3-minute test is much more appropriate. I think, Rich,
I'm listening.
Just an interesting point. Grace brought up an interesting point. Where's Tracy? She disappeared.
She had to go take care of dog.
Okay.
So.
Junior athletes. Steve? Where's Steve gone?
Steve is out front, maybe?
No, I think
he's in the restaurant.
Okay, I'll wait till he gets back because
he can hear you from there.
Unfortunately, we don't have any insulation.
We need to think of radiant barrier and insulation. Those two things.
Joseph gave me a quote real quick just to blow in. I think it was like $600 to blow it all in. I was like,
radiant barrier will probably be another 600.
Okay.
But you know what that is, right?
I do.
Yeah,
I do.
and that'll make a huge
Well,
difference.
surely, Mark will.
Plus, there's no ventilation.
Surely Mark can help us out.
There's no ventilation up
I
there.
know, it's a problem. And
You
of course,
got-
I didn't want to put it in
there's-
until the leak was fixed.
There's three components that we have to two really.
Right.
Insulation and ventilation. If you can't have those two in your attic, you're screwed.
Okay. So we need to cut.
And then radiant barrier is, that's easily accessible.
Okay.
That would make a big difference.
Okay. Let's.
I did it at my house in Capel, and it cut the house stayed cold.
Right.
We probably cut $200 to $250 off of our summer electricity.
Really.
Yep.
By shutting off all of our computer trainers and computers and screens and all that other stuff up north, and putting the overnight, and then putting the AC at 78 or higher, looks like we've shaved about $70 off of our electrical bill.
I think either we should get the manuals or whatever and start, do some programming on those.
Yeah, sure.
So that it's cool when your riders come in for class.
Right.
And then during the day, okay, it can warm up a little bit, go to the 78, but an hour before class,
Right.
it automatically
I
kicks
think the
down.
nests are selling for $250. There's used nests available too. Those are those ones we program the iPhones.
So Craig brought up an
Sorry
interesting
about
point about junior athletes. If you're dealing with junior athletes, what you need to be sensitive to is the fact that, really under the age of 14, it just needs to be about having fun. I know competitive swimming is a little bit different in the sense that they're kind of getting the kids to crush it when they're 9 years old. But the reality is that in cycling and running, it really wants to be about having fun. And part of the reason is that young children do not have a well-developed sort of physiological clear indicators of threshold, critical pace, power, whatever. And certainly their awareness of it is virtually non-existent. And this is why you see with little kids that when they go to play, they're like a whirling dervish for 5 minutes, and then they collapse. And then like half an hour later, they're a whirling dervish for 5 minutes, and then they collapse. It's because they have no sense of pacing. So their awareness and their feeling, their body's capacity to sense, aerobic versus non-aerobic, or can't talk versus pausing for breath, is absolutely non-existent. And so it's why training kids, you have to be quite careful with trying to do threshold work, is simply because they're very insensitive to being aware of it. And so what happens is they end up normally going harder than they should be, most cases. And actually, if you look at swimming, and you chat to a swim coach, what they'll tell you is that with younger kids, actually a lot of swimming they do is, going back to my neural thing about good technique, briefly, high speed, is that with little kids, a lot of the stuff they do is really short and really high speed, and the rest of the time they're just plodding back and forth, a bit more high speed. You dress it up and make it fun in different ways, but principally it's a very, very, very polarized approach. So if you do get young athletes come in, you definitely want to stay away from that middle ground.
Why are there so many swim coaches that endorse the grade school, early morning, grade school, early afternoon model? I mean, doesn't that just lead to severe burnout?
You can absorb more training stress in swimming than you can do in biking and running, simply because of the nature of the sport. It's non-weight bearing, body's horizontal, so there's less cardiac load. It's impossible to have as high a cardiac load just because it's to do with muscle recruitment and the fact that you're not fighting gravity to pump the blood. So there's partly that. It's also because actually the philosophy of swim coaching, Steve knows Tim, one of the masters coach down in Woodlands, and he'd say there was an era where swim coaching went through a phase of being very, very high volume orientated, and it's kind of really begun to step back from that in the last 10 years. But I mean, in a relative sense, initially when they got into it, at college, you had kids doing like 100,000 yards a week.
Yeah. I remember 10 years ago, 12 years ago, that was very
now, that's kind of come back down, and it's much more quality orientated. But the simple fact of the matter is that because with swimming, there's less, you can absorb more stress, and there's less strain on the body. You can just do more. So that's why. And to an extent, in terms of producing the next great, Ryan Lochte, the idea is eggs against the wall.
Yeah, they still subscribe to the eggs against the wall.
To an extent, yeah. I mean, and it's a fine, Rich. It's with elite, developing elite athletes. It's a fine line. It is a really fine line between
with a bunch of
preserving the long-term health, self-interests of the athlete, and just turning the screw enough. Now, the irony is if you're quantifying the training stress, and if you're measuring how to build your house, the more accurately you're measuring, when you're training, juniors on the bike, training them with a power meter, the more accurately the measuring and you're quantifying, the easier it is for you to make those intelligent decisions about that's too much, that's not enough. Ethical salon.
Do you have a resistance training component at your studio? Not right now. You did have Pilates or yoga.
We used to have aerial yoga.
Aerial yoga.
Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah, she ended up going down in Houston where it wasn't big enough up where we were.
But you got that.
We have
that square footage.
We have a gym upstairs with a personal trainer. We have a sports psychologist.
Interesting. Sports psychologist.
Yes, and she's doing well. It's bringing people into our studio too. So she works with all different type of athletes.
Okay.
Now that there's something you brought up when I saw you were here last time. You mentioned Tudor Bompa, and you were talking about, you just said stress.
Yes.
How much stress is any given program? And he had something interesting in his book Periodization that I read, the index of overall demand on an athlete, which would include the training stress, the stress of relationships, the stress of if they've been sick, the stress of work, whatever. And I just think that gets overlooked sometimes in a lot of programs because the tendency is for people that we work with to say, "Oh, I'm a cyclist." No, you're not. You're an accountant.
Yeah.
Okay.
That's true.
You live in a
It
cubicle
could-
10 hours a day.
Right. You could come to me and tell me when your racing income exceeds how much money you spend on it, and then coaching and time in the pool and all that stuff, and then you're a professional.
And this brings up an interesting point because Craig actually mentioned it. It was either over lunch, but within the software. So if I open a cycling session here, so you've got it says scheduled training. Okay, so if I click on there, so you've got basically the ability to write in the scheduled training. So I, for argument's sake, might write in here, you can put it on the scheduled training. Do you want to see on that bar screen?
Oh, Megan's
That's okay, I'll be fine.
3-minute test, okay? Now, as a coach, I write in that scheduled training, and the athlete loads in the data, so we get a nice pretty graph like this. But I still want to see some comments in this athlete notes section. Because if I want to know, if there's anything going on, is there things that they need to tell me? And I get quite shirty with athletes if they are prone to not actually giving me any feedback. So if I scroll back through, this cyclist, okay, here,
yeah, this is feedback.
A bit tame tonight, speed-wise, but legs feeling really good. So I combine that subjective data as a coach with the qualitative data from the actual, from the power meter or whatever, or heart monitor. But yeah, it's a valid point. And actually something we were talking about this morning was there are some coaches beginning to use like heart rate variability because it's a global indicator of stress.
Right.
You can chuck in there whatever you want in terms of stress, but
Yeah, I have a follower guy on Facebook, Mike T. Nelson, and that's one of his big deals is heart rate variability to measure in a given day. Like, hey, I should back off today, or maybe I should take a day off, versus, oh yeah, I'm going to tear it up today, kind of thing, using that. And then Charles Poliquin said he heard of a study in which they had athletes look at, all those little faces you can click on to put it in a text message or in an email. They said, okay, how do you feel today? And had them click on those, and that became highly correlated with effort. If they had a frowny face, they might have, a lot of times they had a terrible day. If they had a big smiley face, they would have a good day.
yeah, and that's where that's a very simplistic way that actually previously about 20 years ago, South African Institute of Sport were using a POMS questionnaire, which is the personality measurement system. Where it's very specific questions that sort of psychologists help design that give you an indication of what are the drivers that sit behind that athlete's physical state and mental state. That's cool. So, and that's the thing, as we were saying to these guys, is that with the software, your bench, your measurements, don't necessarily have to be, the watts coming out of your power meter. It can be. It can be just a global indicator of, how did I feel, how did that session feel out of, 1 to 1,000, or, it's heart rate, the assessment that you do to see how the fitness is being, is improving, is heart rate variability, even though they're using the power meter. And that would obviate your individual who just simply mentally cannot do a test, because immediately what you're saying to them is that just record this piece of information every 3 days, every Wednesday and every Saturday we're going to take this measurement. We're just going to keep a record of it, and then you don't do any testing. And he doesn't think you're doing any testing, but it's like, oh look, your performance is improving, or oh look, that week when you had to get that project finished and you got 15 hours of sleep in 5 days. That's why you can train.
David, could you go back to the daily diary again and talk about the sliding metrics at the top? And while he's doing that, unfortunately the company went out of business, I think last week, but there was a sleep coach device called ZEO Sleep Coach. And I think hopefully somebody's going to buy it or it'll go open source, but it measured the amount of time you spent in REM, light, and deep sleep, plus the number of hours that you were asleep, plus the number of times during the night you woke up. And it came up with a scoring system. And Lim came up, he started using it with his athletes in 2008, 2009. And it really did have some good effect, because as you know, one of the most important aspects of training is recovery. So if we can train hard and recover harder, it can lead to better anabolic state more quickly.
There's actually an app for the iPhone where you just leave the iPhone on the corner of the bed.
Okay.
But obviously if you have a partner or a dog,
Yeah.
it's somewhat moot.
Right. It's gonna get eaten.
Or Tempur-Pedic mattress.
Yeah. It's good.
That's not gonna work.
Exactly right. Exactly.
That measures the mood. So yeah, these things.
You should just say you've seen our pictures of Pete.
These things up top. Rich, you were asking about these.
Yes, that's what
To be honest, this one at the bottom here, which is HRV, that you can customize.
Right.
These ones are just really, really simple kind of sliding, you know, felt really poor, felt really good, you know, on a POM scale. We don't plot it, we don't store it,
Really?
it's there.
Okay, so it's just, all right.
Another request on British Triathlon's part, you know, quality of sleep. But, you know, what you can do as a coach is that if you get somebody filling that out, you've got waking heart rate, number of hours of sleep, you get somebody filling that out, then very quickly if they start to not perform, even though the training, you know, is indicative of the fact they should be, you know, you could start to look back and go, okay, well hang on a minute, why was that? You might find that there's probably enough of a description in the athlete notes for them not to have to fill that out, you know, for them not to have to.
We want
if they
to
tell
encourage.
you know, if they tell you that, if they just type that, you know, oh, I've not slept well for the last 3 days and my boss is being an asshole at work, then, you know, yeah, mentally they're in pretty poor shape and you're not getting a great deal of sleep. But they've kind of told you that in the training notes. So,
Got it. Okay. Okay. That helps. Okay. Do you have any questions about anything?
I have one, it's not really on this, but the 3 and the 6 and the 12-minute test, is it possible to get the same information if you have like a bunch of data from a bunch of rides
yeah.
and you dump it in?
If you generally feel that if there's a maximal effort.
Show them the finder, the top 10 finder. Okay, go to the.
He's fixing to show you some.
Okay, go to data. Go to data. Go to the data.
Oh, sorry, I know what you mean. Yes, right, okay, yeah.
You
Sorry, I was
can go-
thinking,
that's
thought you
right.
were trying to do intervals. No, I know what you mean.
Yeah, the other cycling.
Okay, so let's say somebody comes to you and they've got a whole load of training data and they just say, look, there you go.
Yeah.
Well, you know, actually, you know, my data is a good example of this because, like I said, I don't do any testing.
Right.
I just kind of played around, but what I basically did was take all of my training data and go, okay, what was, so I clicked on this thing here called records, and I went, chose an interval, and I went, okay, between a certain period of time, give me the best intervals for 150 minutes. Because I kind of thought in my head, well, that's kind of when I've done pretty solid rides.
Right.
It's for like 2.5 hours. And, you know, give me 6 samples. So we click refresh, and then
CPU runs.
you know, the CPU runs, and you know, it will come out and it will tell you, you know, these are the dates that you had those best efforts, and then you can copy those across to here and then calculate your model. So if you've got somebody, or you have a lot of your own training data, of, you know, that includes lots of races, you know, and you want to see, you know, actually, you know, you want to get a good indication of what your fitness is like, or, you know, what your training's been like, you know, you can do that. But bear in mind, all that you're doing is a little bit, excuse the kind of phrase, but is a little bit of sort of mathematical masturbation.
Yeah.
Because you're just taking a bunch of numbers and you're trying to find the best fit. It might not necessarily tell you anything more than this is the best fit. You know, yes, you're fitter, like I said earlier, you know, yes, you are fitter over a 12-month period, but are you, you know, has your training made you fitter for that actual assessment? It's, you know, less of a...
Like teaching to take the test.
Yeah. So you can see here, now you've got a bunch of efforts. So you've got a bunch of efforts that comes out with, so from that data. You know, and then you can
Now-
take that and copy that
Right.
across.
Now that can screw with your R and R squared. If you don't have good data,
Yeah, that's like I said, if your training has been just nothing more than, you know, physical activity that's kept you healthy,
yeah,
then it hasn't been specific to anything apart from keeping you physically active and healthy. It's nothing more than that. So then all that you're doing is you're playing around with a bunch of numbers,
as you
trying
said,
to get a piece of mathematical accuracy that
Math
doesn't really mean
master.
anything.
Mathematical elements, you said.
With regard to strength training,
Yeah.
I've heard it said that when an athlete is maybe in a situation where they're overtrained and you have to back off, you reduce the volume, never the intensity of the intended workout if you're going to do something that day. In other words,
Okay.
you know what I'm saying? If you said,
I'm going to
okay,
take you back a couple of steps. Be very careful with the use of the word, as coaches, be very careful with the use of the word overtrained. Okay? Because actually, very, very, very rarely is anybody ever overtrained.
all right, well, let's back up
They
and
may
say,
be functionally overreached,
Mhm.
which simply means they just haven't recovered enough from an appropriate amount of training,
okay,
or then that's actually, no, that would be non-functionally overreached because they're not. Functionally overreached would be that they've done a little bit too much training in the short term.
okay, which is purposeful in some
Yeah, which is purposeful. Overtrained would be that they are basically stuffed and need to simply like stop doing exercise for 6 months.
Okay, so I'll back up and say somebody's not going to be able to handle the entire load prescribed for the day, then you say, okay, I've heard for strength, it's back off on the volume, not the intensity. Would that apply to conditioning of the aerobic system or some of the stuff that we're talking about here?
Because coming back to these constants, and if I go to this example with Sol, come back to these constants here. So with this individual, his fitness lingers around for 45 days.
Okay.
You know, his fatigue disappears in 3 days. So the reality is that if he stopped training for 3 days and did nothing and sat on the sofa, it's not going to make a blind bit of difference to his aerobic conditioning.
What you're saying.
Very cool.
Mentally, he might be like, oh, I don't like the idea of that.
What we're arguing is, right, this is so scientifically evidence-based that the science really, if we put good data in, the science won't lie. It'll really help predict performance and peaking.
And this is where some of the clients, especially the average Jane and Joes, they don't get to train consistently because they got crappy bosses, been there, crappy lives, crappy schedules, crappy nutrition. That I've done all of those all at the same time. That think, well, I've been off the bike and not doing anything for 3 to 4 days. Am I going to turn completely to mush? You might get some cobwebs, and mentally it's not going to help you. But like, do I make up for it? It's like, no. You need to start where you've been.
Never catch up. I mean, that's my motto as a coach. Never let an athlete catch up.
Yeah, they'll try and catch up.
I might let an athlete, if an athlete says to me, you know, on a Wednesday, you know, like I've got a lawyer and he's like a transcontinental lawyer, so he travels all over Europe and flies across here all the time. And he might say, okay, I couldn't do Tuesday's bike, but I bumped it to Wednesday. Or, you know, I couldn't do Tuesday's bike, I'm going to do it on Friday because I've got an easier day. And I'll be slightly more comfortable with that because I know that what he's not doing is trying to kind of load a whole bunch of sessions he's missed into the end of the week. But what he's actually doing is going, okay, well, I'm more restful on Friday, whereas on Tuesday it's kind of just flat out.
Just let it go because you're just going to have a bad
there's
experience anyways.
Yeah, I mean, 99% of cases, you let it slide. You know, and with my elites as well, you know, I've had elites say to me, oh, I know, I had a bit of a sore hamstring, so I, you know, halved that run session on the track. Shall I add half an hour of running to the Sunday long run? No.
Yeah.
Definitely not. You know, you just kind
Go
of,
find a hot tub and a margarita. Why not?
all
That's what I
It's
usually.
therapy.
Okay. Let's give him a chance to make it home to Houston before the weather cuts in and the sun sets, because he's got to fly out tomorrow. Give him a hand. Thank you.
Thank you.
And the best news is that we'll have him stateside soon.
Well, just kind of hold your horses.
But I'm just saying, I'm excited about that opportunity. If anybody wants to follow up together, I think we can do group, we can do group think stuff. We can, I have no hesitation to, work with you in Fort Worth, or we can, have another jam session if people have questions and things, if David's not available or if Philip's not available. I would like to bring Philip down as well. He lives in Chicago, but he's got a brand new gig as the director for a sports medicine clinic. Is that
Yeah,
right?
he's in charge of sports medicine at the Chicago Lutheran Hospital. So
Yeah.
he's a director of sports medicine.
The software for an individual purchase, which allows for up to 3 athletes, is I think $125. For up to 10 athletes, it's $199, and then unlimited, I think, is what, $250 or $300,
Yes.
something like that. It's an upfront cost, but let me tell you, it's.
There's no subscription charges or
Right.
anything like that.
They're not in it to make money. They're in it to help make better athletes. To steal from Andy Coggin, his argument was, we're not looking for the next Lance, we're looking to raise the quality of the crop every year. And I believe it, because, that's why Cycling Center Dallas exists. That's why I have so much faith in all of you. And I'm just grateful that David was able to share this with us. So thank you again. We will put your information to good use and grow with it. All right, guys, let's shut it down, and we've got to get up early tomorrow.
Yeah, tomorrow's a work day.
Kurt, grant me a little bit of grace here, but I will be ready on Thursday to start. Kurt's gonna start working with us on some resistance training. So let's
Us as in,
you and I.
Yeah, so.
you better find that 3-pound weight, dude. I'm
That
gone.
way you
I
can work
got
off all
nothing.
those little peach cups and
Yeah.
cookies
No,
and all that stuff that
She
you're
knows.
in there.
You missed the first slide of the strength and conditioning, by the way. I said the first and foremost, the most important part of getting like super awesomely strong cycling and running and triathlon is CrossFit.
Let me tell you, I got, my hands in a lot of different pies with regard to friends on Facebook, but by and large, most of the educated people that I know that I have respect for who've been in the strength training business, you say CrossFit and they start to boil.
They blow up.
Yes, and it's like one of them went on this rant. Well, what do you do if you're not good enough to play blah, 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 you're not good enough to do this and this and this? You invent an entirely new sport, CrossFit, and you throw so many weird things at it.
You charge for it.
And he said the winning CrossFit athlete couldn't play in the NBA, he couldn't play in the NFL, he couldn't play Major League Baseball, he couldn't win a track, he just goes through on and on and on.
So sometimes I've had a few coaches roll it up
for
in
Dodgeball.
coaching.
well, no, you might be able to make it to some sort of level in military training.
Requirement that they can't do bodyweight squat.
Yeah, but I mean.
It's so funny. Unless they email a few questions.
So you two real quick, I am gonna go to that funeral on Thursday and Friday. So I'll be unavailable. She and I are gonna work on Friday, so make sure the rent's covered, and everything else, and then,
It's the third and second
he's already dead. Oh, okay. He's already died, but we're having a
No, the difference is,
average
over that last 30 seconds,
Okay.
the only thing with
It's actually,
There's
blood pressure.
Oh, well,
If you move blood pressure on that range, think about putting power.
It's a morning thing. Guys, thank you.
And plus, 3-minute test a year.
Okay, Tracy, I'll let you turn this off. I don't know how to
You
do
wait
it.
till you do it first, buddy, because remember it's blind, it falls out from the gun.
Is there another?
So you're going to have Chris, Bob, you get to scream at him.
Do you want to come home and
Yeah, so like when you lazy guys.